Welcome to the Tomorrow Zone Catalyst podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Rubin. This conversation is part of our Future Shaping Leaders series, inspired by my book, Enter the Tomorrow Zone: How to Inspire Breakthrough Innovation and Shape Your Future. In this series, we're exploring how senior leaders are thinking and leading when they're responsible for shaping the future inside of complex organizations and markets. So let's get into it. Today's guest is Dr. Rosie Ward, who is shaping the future by challenging how we think about leadership. Dr. Rosie Ward is the CEO and founder of Salvio Partners, a leadership consultant and executive coach with over 25 years experience helping leaders navigate complexity with both clarity and courage. She's recognized as one of the top 50 women leaders in Minnesota. She is known for her work in future-proofing organizations by strengthening culture and equipping leaders to lead with greater humanity and effectiveness. And she's an award-winning author of multiple books on culture and leadership. And we're especially excited for her upcoming book, Future Proofing Leadership, which explores the internal patterns that shape how leaders are showing up and making decisions under pressure. Rosie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have this geek out session. Yay.
Me
Let's
too.
go.
Yeah. I was nerding out and digging into your book last night. And I have to admit, once I got into it, it grabbed me and I just could not put it down. So I was stuck on the couch for several hours.
Yay, I love that.
So I can say, I have firsthand experience. Your book is very moving. And I think that, given the work that we do at Tomorrow Zone, we're all about inspiring fresh thinking about what's possible for the future and the actions that you're taking today. But I think that the work you're doing is so important because we're surrounded by such craziness and change today. How we think about leadership matters, and it really starts with each one of us individually.
100%. And 100%. And I firmly believe, and our firm firmly believes and is rooted in the notion that leadership is not about a title or a role, and that in this crazy world that we're all in, and I think I say this in the book somewhere because I say it all the time. I'm pretty sure I say this in the book, but that I feel like we are at a really pivotal moment where not only do we all have an opportunity, but I think that the only way we're going to all be future ready and shift the trajectory that some things are going on that isn't really helpful is we have a responsibility to choose to show up as a leader in our life. And that is critical, I think.
Yeah. And I want to get in and I really want to discuss some of these delicious concepts in your book. But before we dive into that, I would love, Rosie, if you could just share kind of a 30,000 foot view of the work that you're leading and the strategic focus behind it.
Yeah. So the work we're leading, I mean, it sounds kind of elevator pitchy when we say we're future proofing organizations, but really it is looking at the collective mindsets that operate within organizations that are getting in their way of having the culture they want to have, the engagement they want to have, the growth that they want to have. So it's helping them look at individual development and what does that look like, looking at team-based courage building and really what are those team dynamics, and then looking at what are the systems that they need to either reinforce or level up that are going to support all of that. So we kind of look, so high level, it's really looking at this three-legged stool of what does it mean for organizations and their people to thrive in a really disruptive environment. So we're doing consulting work and development work in that space, if you will.
Awesome. So, and I know you use the term VUCA quite a bit in your book, and the innovation groups that I'm dealing with, we're always talking about that, but you talk about VUCA extreme. So, in that context, what are you seeing in leaders and organizations right now that is making this topic so urgent?
I'm seeing a lot of things, but I think what it is it's this unsettledness is for the best way, this swirl of I don't know how to deal with my own discomfort and uncertainty and my own emotions around what is happening and where we're supposed to go, and am I equipped to do it, and what I know to be true isn't getting us there, and all of that. And now, how do I also, if I'm a formal people leader, how do I also navigate and lead this energy that is coming at me where I'm not a trained therapist? I'm not this. I don't know. I'm in a place I haven't been before, and I don't know how to navigate this. It's like being a fish out of water. And so we're seeing that consistently, whether, someone is in the tail end of their career or, the mid part or early part. We're just seeing this fundamental, I don't know how to navigate this disruptive energy, the human emotions that are coming along with this. And then you add all the technology and the AI and the geopolitical and just the whole shebang, which is why I call it a VUCA extreme environment.
Can you define VUCA for our listeners?
Yeah, it's not my term. It comes from the military, but a lot of leadership people use it. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I just like using it because it shorthands the language to say we are living and working and leading in a world where disruption is the norm. And it's just kind of like, yep, okay, here we go. You know what? Your technology didn't work. VUCA. You just got stranded because your airline went out of business. VUCA. It's that kids, you go, oh, okay. Like we can get all worked up about it, or we can go, this is the world we're in. What we then have to do is how do we truly become adaptable? Because it's one thing to say, oh, we need people to be flexible and adaptable, but we are not wired to be flexible and adaptable as human beings. And that's really what we're seeing is all of this change around us is demanding that we can be flexible and adaptable and like go with the flow, but our humanness is fundamentally working against us. And then you have emotions and you have all this stuff. And so that's really the predicament that we are seeing across industry, across organization size. Doesn't matter how long someone's been a leader. It's a shared human experience, I guess.
And I want to just kind of double click on that, the human experience, because in your book, you talk a lot about how internal patterns within each of us individual, and each person is different, but those internal patterns within us shape the external leadership outcomes. Where do you see leaders most often misreading the external challenges when maybe that the real issue is something internal and individual?
Everywhere. Where do I see it? I truly see it everywhere. In fact, when I'm leading workshops, I will put like a funny joke slide because, when you're asking people to look at themselves, it's cringy. And there is a line in Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero that says, I'll stare directly at the sun, but never in the mirror. And so I say that because we don't like to look in the mirror. It's so much easier to say, my team is not adaptable. My team is not leveled up. My team is not getting the job done. My team, right? It's so easy to look at everyone else or we get into us versus them as if a collective them is like the system or corporate or other leaders or another division, right? We get into this very kind of us versus them rather than go, I'm really uncomfortable here. Or maybe I have not been leading well, or I have not been delegating well, or I have not been having the growth feedback conversations I need to have, and therefore my team is not where they need to be. It's easier to blame my team and say they're not accountable than to say, maybe I have been under leading them, as an example. And so I just see this happening absolutely everywhere, that when organizations hit sticking points, whether it's around execution or strategy or change, it's so much easier to look at, well, let's double down on the change management tool and model. Let's double down on this system. And it creates an excuse and a barrier from looking at what is largely probably driving their challenges, which is their internal assumptions and their mindsets, because it's messy work to do and it's hard to look in the mirror, but it's necessary.
It is messy and it is uncomfortable. And it's interesting that you kind of went there. It's so much easier to focus on the tools and the tactics and the toys than to do the real work of getting under the surface to understand what's really going on. And as you were talking, it was reminding me of one of the quotes I captured as I was reading your book, because I think it just kind of reveals how judgy we can get in those situations is we're looking externally rather than looking internally. And you said, I believe that most people don't wake up in the morning thinking, I'm going to be a difficult butthead today.
That is me. I say that a lot. Yeah. But really, who does? I mean, let's be real.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
don't.
But it just like really like brought it home and made it so real because it can be so tempting and so easy to try to blame everybody else, you
Oh, yeah.
know? And if you think somebody's showing up as a butthead, like, what are you doing?
Well, yeah, because like either you're tolerating it or you're, and I mean, yeah, it's yeah, and I think, when I say that, it's that most of us, again, there might be some people that decide I'm going to be difficult, but I don't think people do it with intention. When we are behaving like a butthead, because we all do it at some point in time, is it's something in us got activated, and we're not leading and living and moving through life with intention. We're on this autopilot, self-protective hijack mode. And that's where our buttheadness, if you will, comes out. And so the work before us is, how do we recognize that that version of us is trying to take control in the driver's seat? How do we regulate it? How do we then kick it to the back seat? And when that person still takes over the driver's seat, because that person will at some point in time, how do we clean up our mess and account for it and move forward? Because that's another thing that we miss a lot too, that when that version of us shows up, we just like, whatever, pretend it was everyone else's fault or give me a break or whatever. And it's like, nope, and we're going to screw up. And that's the other thing I want people to know. Like, I'm like, just because, I mean, similar to you, just because I facilitate this stuff, I'm a human being and I screw up. And I regularly, all the tools that we talk about in the work we do and in the book, I selfishly use them myself because it helps me reset when my humanness gets the best of me. Like, none of us are immune to this. Nobody.
Well, yeah, and I think that the work that you're doing is so interesting and so deep and also so very practical, but also the muscle that we need to build as we move into this VUCA extreme future is just that. Like, how do we recognize and reset
Yeah.
so that we're not driving everyone crazy all around us? Because we've got crazy coming from all sides. We don't need to be another instigator. So, this work is so interesting, Rosie. Was there a moment in your work where you realized that traditional leadership development wasn't really addressing the real problem? And what shifted in how you approached leadership development after that?
That's a great question. And I don't know that there was a specific moment, but it was one of these that I just pay attention, and I'm a patterns person. So I just kind of look at where things are connected and I see patterns showing up. And I remember I was working at like a consulting firm, and I just kept thinking, why do you keep bringing in the same workshops or offering the same trainings? Like, if not every year, every other year. And I'm sitting here thinking, if we have to just keep regurgitating the same stuff, there's something wrong. It's not sticking. And I had also gone through some of my earlier coaching certifications. I've been coaching for 20, 22, 23 years, something like that. And I happened to gravitate towards specific methodologies of coaching that were about looking at thinking more than the behaviors anyway. So this has kind of been ingrained in me. And I just was like, well, if we're just giving them skills and we're not actually fundamentally helping them shift how they think, no wonder why you have to, it's the definition of insanity. Like, no wonder why you have to keep these vendors on repeat and these workshops on repeat. And in an ideal world, people should only have to go through them once and then have some tools to kind of get reminded, because they're doing training, not development. So I started to just see these patterns, quite frankly. And then over the last probably 10 years, as I've been doing more in-depth coaching with a very specific methodology we use out of Harvard called Immunity to Change. Like, we started embedding that and adding that into our practice with leaders. And you really get at these underlying mindsets. And I started having leaders like CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, a leader of their own startup, someone executive in a 30,000 live company. I mean, everything in between. And they would say things like, am I the most messed up person you've ever seen? Self-deprecating, am I failing coaching? Oh my God, should we just pull the plug right now? Like, the self-deprecating comments that these really outwardly appearing successful leaders would make about their own humanness and that there was something wrong with them. And I just kept saying, trust me, I've seen this like a gajillion times before. And that's kind of what led to the work in this new book and the research we did. Cause I'm like, I'm seeing this happen over and over and over and over. And it just starts to build that at some point you go, there's something here. We got to look at this differently.
Yeah, and I really love the way that you dug in to get to the root of the problems rather than dealing at a surface level with symptoms. And, and that's what's so brilliant about your approach and really what you've done here. One of the things that you talk about in your book that is intriguing for me, so we're Tomorrow Zone. We talk a lot about not getting stuck in the yesterday zone, but I loved your term. You introduced the idea of the stuckness zone. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how does that show up in real leadership decisions, especially when leaders are dealing with high pressure and uncertainty?
We got all kinds of zones, right? And I think that like the stuckness zone probably has a lot of similarities to your yesterday zone as, as I think about where our synergies are. So I was trying to figure out what to call this. So if we talk about VUCA, right, the world being uncertain and disruptive. And so I like use this metaphor, like the more VUCA our world becomes, it's almost like a teeter-totter or scales that are getting imbalanced. So it's like the more that the world gets disrupted, the more our biological self-protective instincts kick in. We are wired to be on high alert for threat. We are wired to seek out familiarity and comfort. Look at all the neuroscience. Look at all the, I mean, this is like a known fact. And what I've seen in the work we do is I used to call it this gap is widening between the disruption and the demands of a VUCA world and our self-protective instincts. So that gap is what we refer to as the stuckness zone. And so we can look at that zone and say, okay, I can either somehow expect the world to miraculously become less complex and less VUCA, which you'd be living in a fantasy world if you think that's going to happen. And I can sit and double down and have a temper tantrum and blame everything and just whatever. Or I can go, okay, this is the reality. What do I need to do to get unstuck, right? And move through that zone so that I can thrive in this environment. And that means I've got to reconcile my own humanness and I've got to kind of upgrade that humanness. So that's what we refer to as the stuckness zone. And so where I see leaders getting, trapped in that is it is those mindsets and it is this not wanting to look in the mirror. It is the wanting people to somehow be predictable, controllable robots or something when you're dealing with human beings. And I mean, I know we're going to get into this, but in this world of increasing AI and technology, all of the data keeps saying that it is even more important that leaders have these human centric skills. Like they are not going away, they are actually only elevating. And so when we don't have those skills, we stay trapped in that stuckness zone where we are not equipped to meet the demands that the world, current and future, is asking of us. We can't go into the tomorrow zone. We are in the stuckness zone deeply.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this is so important because like the world is rushing to adopt AI right now. And there's such a temptation to just throw technology at everything, automate all the things. And the thing that I'm concerned about is losing the humans in the process. And it's not just the danger of thinking that AI is going to replace humans in certain jobs and tasks and things, but also when we rush toward the tools without really getting clear on the human impact, we can impact the human experience in really crazy ways that actually are counter to the type of objectives you're pursuing with the AI adoption.
Yeah.
And then, you have to be really honest about where the true value lies, and it's never only about the tech.
Well, and here's the thing is I was talking to someone recently who said this. I'm like, that is such a great way of putting it. And I can't remember who said it or I would attribute them. But that when we think about the world of business and just the world in general, it is still human beings that are making decisions, right? Your end customer, even if you're a technology for like, you're asking a human to buy your services, a human to buy your product. And so if we don't know how to relate on a human level, and the problem is, we could go into a whole other thing about this, but with technology, as we all become more and more absorbed in our devices and technology, there's a lot of data to support that we are losing our ability to understand how to connect on a human level and how to meet core human needs we all have of being seen and feeling like we matter. And so you start to look at all the data on the loneliness epidemic. You look at native digitals, which is basically Gen Z and everybody that's coming beyond them. And just there's mental health. I mean, there's so much wrapped into it. But at the end of the day, it is our humanness isn't going to go away. And because of the overuse in many cases of technology, we're using it to avoid awkward conversations. We're using it to avoid awkward interactions. And so our skill sets are getting diminished when they need to actually escalate.
Yes. And so I'm curious. So we do a lot of work in like digital transformation initiatives, business transformations that very often, I mean, it's just the world today, are technology driven. And one of the things that I see continually is leaders who default to the tech tools rather than having the tough conversations. Like sometimes they'll like they would rather reinstall new software than have a conversation with somebody about why they're not adopting the policy or the new technology or the new process. And that's that that human skill and like avoiding it in favor of technology as a
Or they'll jump in
replacement.
and do it themselves rather than have that growth conversation with somebody.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
yeah, there's all kinds of ways we will overcompensate to avoid the human interactions that might be uncomfortable in one way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Yeah, so in your book, you have this assessment that you can take, and it's very revealing. I'll just say that. But it sort of shines a lens on where you might have some faulty programs or faulty tapes running in your mind that need to be addressed to be more
Yeah.
effective. And so you've identified several of those subconscious kind of faulty programs that might be driving behavior. How do those types of things show up in how leaders are making decisions, prioritizing, and leading teams, especially when it's high stakes or a fast moving environment like we're in now?
They show up all over the place. And I have to tell you, Deborah, that when we identified this from our analysis, I started laughing because I was like, oh crap, I've had like probably all 7, but for sure, like 4, like I had a really nice concert of 4 of them that were running the show for me for a long, long time. And then I have 1 or 2 that are still like my ongoing kryptonite that I have to deal with. So I share that to say to people that like most people are running more than one faulty program. The combination is going to make up like kind of how that shows up for you. But I think about the faulty programs are like our inner operating system. So just like your phone has an iOS, your computer has an iOS that is running kind of underneath the surface and everything else is on top of it. It's these faulty programs are subconscious and sometimes unconscious. It's the wiring that has been there for a long, long, long time. And it's just ingrained. And we, as human beings, are wired to be on default 90 to 95% of the time. So most of the time, we're not even aware that they're there. It's just modus operandi. And I will tell you something that I had a leader who we're in the process of upgrading her inner operating system said something to me where she's like, well, I've always just thought that this is just the way I am. And I've always just said this is just who I am. And I'm realizing, but that doesn't have to be who I am anymore. And it's that freedom of recognizing that I am not beholden to this inner operating system, even if it's been running me for 40, 50, 60 years. We have neuroplasticity into our 70th decade. So how these will show up are things like you have leaders who are like, I think I'm good at delegating, but I'm just not, or I have a team who's not accountable. And you start digging in and it might be, well, you know what? If I have the people pleasing program or I have the mime program that tells me that if I speak up and people get mad and don't like me, that rejection is a really scary thing, or that disharmony on any level on my team is no bueno, well, then I'm not going to have those conversations. And you can put me in crucial conversations and every other tool-based training to tell me how to have those conversations. But until I upgrade that operating system that tells me it's not safe to have those conversations, those tools are going to sit collecting dust. Or if I am struggling with, I hear this a lot from executives, the calendar management and like working on the business versus in the business and getting sucked into meetings and how do they have boundaries and stuff. Well, you know what? If they're running the martyr, which is my needs don't matter and I can handle more stress than people and I'm going to take stuff on, then what are the chances you think that they're going to push back when someone invites them to a meeting that they really don't need to be because they like feeling needed? Or a lot of leaders have the overachiever. They get their worth and value from being highly productive and getting stuff done, but they think that it's conditional on that. So if I'm take like someone who's a new leader, I'm used to being the person, fill in the blank. I'm the salesperson, I'm the customer service rep, I'm the physician, I'm the lawyer. It doesn't matter, but I'm the doer. And now I'm leading other people. And my role needs to shift from being very tangible. I can see the fruits of my labor in many cases. And now it's this nebulous, and I might be overhead. And what value do I add? And what my value is now developing other people to do what I did. Now I'm replaceable. So the overachiever, as an example, will get in our way of effectively developing our collective leadership bench strength when you have people who think, no, my value comes from being the one to do it, and I have to prove that I'm worthy. So those are just a few examples. I mean, I could go on and on, but how these combinations, we tend to take that tool tactic approach here. Here's a book, here's a podcast, here's this, and we wonder why it doesn't work for them or it's really short-lived at best. It's because their inner operating system can't support those tools. But once they do that upgrade, now the tools can be effective.
Yeah, and then we get change that sticks.
Mm-hmm.
So, for leaders who are listening, Rosie, who might be navigating just what feels like constant change, what is one shift that they can make in how they show up internally that could immediately change how they lead externally?
Yeah. I love this question. And one of the things that I regularly say, and I borrowed this from Brene Brown from our Dare to Lead certification, is that calm is your leadership superpower.
Ooh, say
So
that again.
calm is your leadership superpower. And so I think any of us, when we are reacting, we're not going to make good decisions. And usually when we're reacting, our faulty programs are in the driver's seat. And so one of the things that we say in the Dare to Lead program is that the bigger the crisis, the bigger the change, the bigger the stakes, the slower we actually need to move into it. And so it's pause, it's breathe, it's get curious, and just keep going. Calm is my leadership superpower. And if you can just find calm and find neutrality in this completely emotionally charged world, that energy is contagious. So if you are walking through with reactive, anxious energy, that's going to feed and bleed into your team and your colleagues. When you can find that calm, it really is a superpower because it's like, holy cannoli. People can get through stuff. It doesn't make change so scary.
Yeah, well, and also this is so interesting because this actually came up in a client call today, and we were just talking about how dangerous it is to be constantly in high speed mode. And so a lot of the work I do is in the finance industry. And one of the big problems we have with the advent of rapid AI adoption is rapid increase in fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're high speed all the time and you're not calm and you're running at high speed and you're rushing and maybe even exhausted, you're more susceptible to fraudulent dangers. And so it's really, I mean, there are so many applications for
Yeah.
this. Rosie, before we move on, we're going to go into a lightning round, and I have a few quick little questions prepared for you. It's kind of fun. But before we do that, where can our listeners learn more about the great work that you're doing?
I would love to connect or follow me on LinkedIn. That's one place. The easiest place is go to our company website, which is salveopartners.com. And it has info on the book. It has links to all of my socials. It links over to my Dr. Rosie Ward webpage with the podcast. So it's kind of all the links will be there. If you want to just have one spot to go, that would be the place.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will definitely put all of that in our show notes so that
Perfect.
everyone can connect with the Dr. Rosie Ward greatness. So we're at the lightning round. So I'm just looking for some short responses,
Yep.
no overthinking. We always have fun with this. So fill in the blank. Long-term relevance requires blank.
Getting deeply uncomfortable.
Oh, wow. That's good. What word best describes what this work has demanded of you?
Curiosity.
Yeah, I can see that. What is a signal or a shift that you believe leaders might be underestimating right now?
How critical human connection and human relational skills really are.
Oh my gosh, yes. Can you say a little more about that? That is so important.
That people need to know they matter. They need to know that their work matters. They need to feel seen. And when we are driven going a million miles an hour, when we get focused and results and we forget to see the human behind the work, it's a missed opportunity for so many reasons, for well-being, for effectiveness, for engagement. And I think that's one of the things right now that I see an unintended consequence of going so fast that people are starting to feel invisible.
Mm, yes, that is powerful. Rosie, looking back, what do you wish someone would have told you before you started this work?
That you're gonna have a lot of heartburn.
Okay, that's pretty real.
I mean, let's just, challenging the status quo and really trying to like do things differently, which has been my MO and I love it, but it is not for the faint of heart. You get beat up a lot. You have where you're trying to explain something that isn't mainstream yet. And I don't think I'd have it any other way, but it doesn't come without like some, am I crazy? What am I doing? Like people aren't ready for this. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of heartburn that comes with that, but there's a lot of value and reward too.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say, but it's so rewarding to
Yeah.
take that on. Well, Rosie, I appreciate you taking on the hard work of challenging the status quo and helping leaders to shape a brighter future. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it has been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this has been awesome. So, to our listeners, if you're serious about shaping the future inside your organization, I encourage you to check out Rosie's book. Check out my book too, Enter the Tomorrow Zone. And if it sparks ideas or reveals gaps worth exploring, reach out to us at tomorrowzone.io. We would welcome the conversation. I want to thank you, as always, for joining us, for listening in. Like, subscribe, share it with a friend if you found value here. And as always, stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.